Now I want to dig into those new sanctions targeting Russia's top financial institutions and members of Vladimir Putin's inner circle, now even members of his family. Here's President Biden on the impact he believes sanctions are already having on Russia.
Together with our allies and our partners, we're going to keep raising the economic cost and ratchet up the pain for Putin and further increase Russia's economic isolation. The steps we've already taken are predicted to shrink Russia's gross domestic product by double digits this year alone. Just in 1 year, our sanctions are likely to wipe out the last 15 years of Russia's economic gains.
Let's bring in NBC News senior White House correspondent Kelly O'Donnell. Kelly, good morning. Thanks for being with us. So walk us through these new sanctions. What do they add to what's already been in place?
Good morning, Savannah. We have seen a series of sanctions over time, and part of what is new in this tranche of sanctions is that it gets personal. Included among those sanctioned are two of Vladimir Putin's daughters, and very little is known about his immediate family in general terms. But what U.S. officials know is that they believe that Vladimir Putin has been able to use family members to hide some of his wealth. So his adult daughters who live abroad are among those sanctioned. Also, looking at some of the close figures in his government. Some names we know, like the former president, Medvedev, he is among those, and some of the other top officials in government and their spouses. Also looking at some key financial institutions, looking at a ban of U.S. investment in the country, as if that hadn't already begun, because we've seen so many U.S. corporations pulling out, but making that a more formal thing. And so really looking at additional ways to constrict the financial capabilities of Russia. And the American approach to this, along with allies, has been to keep stepping it up, hoping to put more pressure not only on the Kremlin government, but on influential figures in Russia who may be able to have some influence on their government, but also to grind down the financial capabilities of the Russian society. And that's what you heard the president talking about with the shrinkage of the GDP. They think maybe 10 to 15% of the Russian economy could be directly affected by this.
And Kelly, a piece of this puzzle, of course, when you talk about those people who are important within the country, important to President Putin, the oligarchs. I want to play some of what President Biden had to say about taking aim at them.
Think about the incredible amounts of money these oligarchs have stolen. These yachts are millions and millions of dollars. Look, these oligarchs and their family members are not allowed to hold on to their wealth in Europe and the United States and keep these yachts worth hundreds of millions of dollars, their luxury vacation homes, while children in Ukraine are being killed, displaced from their homes every single day.
So, Kelly, we've heard a lot about yachts. We've heard a lot about private jets. Tell us what the White House believes this effect will have and what we know about the individuals who are being targeted.
Well, it has both a sort of optics effect and it has an actual value effect. When you look at the cost of some of these assets, it is a substantial value to those who own them. And so there should be an economic pain associated with it. But it also sends the message of the luxury of the elite lifestyle being attacked here as a penalty for what is happening. You heard the contrast in what the president was saying. We're seeing civilians who were simply living their lives up until February 24th, when this war began, unprovoked, innocent people who have been killed, maimed, their lives destroyed by this, and wanting to exact a price on those who have been otherwise able to enjoy the luxuries of Russian society, the oligarchs who have benefited from the Kremlin aristocracy. And so it has a smaller, perhaps in the overall picture, effect, but it also has kind of a visual punch as well. And those are the people who have levers of power against Putin or with Putin in kind of the world in which he lives. And that, they hope, is another lever as well. Savannah?
All right. Kelly O'Donnell, thank you so much.
Thanks for watching our YouTube channel. Follow today's top stories and breaking news by downloading the NBC News app.